Dale.
It's coming up to 4 minutes past 9. Time to open the LBC Book Club. Tonight we're going to be talking to two authors. We've got Humfrey Hunter with us. He's written a book called The Men Files: What Men Really Think About Life, Love, Dating and a Whole Lot More. It's a rather compact hardback, quite a cheap hardback actually, $12.99 from Headline. Welcome,
very generously
Humfrey.
priced, thank you very much.
It is very generously priced. And also, Neil Humphreys is with us. It's an evening of Humphreys tonight. Neil, you've written a novel called Premier Leach, a story of greed, sleaze and corruption, all about Premier League football. And I guess one of the interesting things about your book is trying to spot who the characters really are based on. I've got my own suspicions on one or two of them, but I'd probably better not say because they're so rich that they'd sue me and LBC, so we wouldn't want that.
Absolutely not, yeah. But I hope certain people's lawyers are getting quite anxious.
Right, well, hopefully not LBC's lawyers. $7.99, paperback, published by Marshall Cavendish. If during the course of the next hour you have a question for either of our authors, the number to call is 0845 6060 973. You can text us on 84850, tweet me at LBC973, or email ian@lbc.co.uk. Humphrey, let's start with you. This is the first paragraph of your book. And brace yourselves. When a man meets a girl for the first time, very often there will be two questions going through his mind. The first is, will she have sex with me? And the second is, how soon? Now, how do you know that's the case? That might be the case in your mind, but what about, how can you generalise like that?
Well, I think if you find a man who, speaking honestly, disagrees with me, I'll be very, very surprised.
He's spot on, let's be honest.
But my book is the thing I try to do is, you know, when men are asked questions by women or anyone, there are two answers. There's the answer people give because it's what they think the other person wants to hear, and a way of portraying us or that particular person as a nice guy, or the perception that they want to give as a nice guy. And then there's the truth. And the whole point of my book is that it's the truth, the unvarnished, honest truth.
Right, so what gave you the idea for writing it, and what's the aim of the book?
The idea developed from a newspaper column I used to write. I was the male dating columnist in London Light, the London evening paper.
Challenging job, I would imagine.
It was difficult, it was tough.
And what does a dating columnist do?
Well, I had to produce one story every week about my dating escapades.
So basically you had to go on a date every single week, otherwise you couldn't really write a column.
Well, it wasn't quite that straightforward, because I very quickly realised that no one lives a life interesting enough to produce a story a week, and if you try to, then you live the wrong kind of life, and the kind of life which will drive you mad. So, holding my hands up and being honest, a lot of those columns were stories which happened to other people, and I just pretended they happened to me because they were great stories and they would be entertaining. And over the course of 2 years, you learn.
So everyone thought you were a complete Lothario, going out on a date every single week with a different woman.
Well, I think they thought I was a very brave failure, because if you read the columns, there was the tone was pretty dismal in terms of results.
So the aim of the book is what?
The aim of the book is twofold, really. Number one, to be amusing, because that's all a book should ever really aim for, I think. And the second thing is to make women realise that men are not as complicated as they think they are, and also to reassure them that we are straightforwardly good people most of the time, and not the idiots we're made out to be.
So you're actually saying that men are quite simple, really? They just need to be understood?
Yes, I am.
Neil Humphreys, you're a man of the world. You live in Australia. You're born in Dagenham, so you've been around a bit.
Especially in Dagenham.
Does that strike a chord with you?
Oh, I think, yes, we're a pretty uncomplicated lot, I think, if we're being completely honest. Decision-making on a Saturday night is pretty much partner and or football and or DVD, depending on what time and what energy levels we have. We are a pretty uncomplicated lot, let's be honest. And I'll be honest with you, I mean, I'm reaching that sort of mid to late 30s now, but I still think I'm 21. And when I walk into restaurants or clubs, I look at a woman, a lady, a young girl, 21, 22, and I think, would she want to sleep with me? You know, I still think that. I mean, and I know
that's the first thing that goes through your head.
When I look in the mirror, I know she doesn't want to sleep with me, but we still think it. We say we don't, we still think it.
Well, I don't know. Do you really think that's just sort of, there's a gene built into the straight male or even the gay male, so it doesn't really make any difference.
No, it doesn't
That's
make
the
any difference
first thing that you think of when you see someone that you find attractive. How quickly can I get them into bed?
It doesn't. I don't think it's quite as simple as that. If you find, I mean, I've noticed the way I am has obviously changed a lot since when I wrote the column. Obviously, I was single, and I'm not now. And your perspective when you're in a happy relationship, I find, changes completely. But when I first met my girlfriend, and I choose my words carefully
because she's listening.
She is listening. My thoughts perhaps weren't purely honourable.
And do you think her thoughts would have been?
Of course, she's a lady.
But is that so wrong? I mean,
he just winked at me then. By the way.
I mean, is it so wrong? I mean, we go back to our Desmond Morris and the Naked Ape, and our night clubbing of the 21st century is our modern day mating ritual. That's what we do. We dress up, we wear our best clothes, we go to pubs and clubs, because at the end of it, we're hoping to engage in some sort of mating ritual. It's what our species do. It's why we've been so good at it for 8 million years or so.
Humphrey, tell me about the advice your friend Giles gave you after you ended your second long-term relationship.
He said, don't get into another relationship for a year.
And was that good advice?
I think it was good advice, because it made me think. Yeah, because before then, I'd never really contemplated in any depth the kind of things that go on in men's heads and in our lives. And when I actually sat down and thought about the fact that I'd been single for 6 months of the previous 8 years, it occurs to me that actually being single for a while might not be a bad idea.
But did you find it odd? Because if you hadn't been single for so long, the natural instinct, I guess, is to jump straight into another relationship because you're just used to being with somebody else.
I suppose it is, but it was odd being single again. But then once he said that, and once I realised where I was in my life, because I hadn't been single for 3 years since when I was 27. And I think men change a lot between the ages of 27 and 30. And certainly I'd changed a lot. My life had changed a lot. The kind of work I was doing and where I was going, what I was trying to do with my life changed. And I realised now that what I needed was a bit of time just on my own and learning about the world and myself and working out things that I wanted. And I don't think there's any difference really between me and virtually many other men.
But you were hitting that age when I think both men and women feel that, well, all of our friends are getting married, they're all having children, oh my God, it's not going to happen to me, I've reached 30, 35, panic, go into the first relationship that you can find.
Well, I did, but then a lot of my friends were settling down and having children and getting married and that kind of thing. But I knew I'd never really felt in a massive rush to do that kind of thing. My father wasn't very young when he had me, for example. So I've always felt that there wasn't a huge pressure to get married and settle down and start having children by the age of 30. So when I became single age 30, was single for 2.5 years, I'm now 34, I wasn't really all that concerned about it. I always thought that as long as I lived my life the right way for me and did the right things for me, then eventually the fates would take care of me and I'd be fine. And I was.
Give me an example of a cringeworthy date you've been on.
A cringeworthy date I've been on. Okay, there's one which is mentioned in the book where I was talking to a girl who I had only met once, very briefly, and she told me in very great detail about what was on my Facebook profile, down to the photos of me at various holidays and parties and that kind of thing, and then started explaining links between people I knew and people she knew, or people who knew people she knew. And this was in the very early days of Facebook, when no one had understood that you could actually put some kind of privacy settings up to stop the whole world seeing everything about your life. And I suddenly felt very, very stalked and very, very, violated and worried, and didn't hang around for very long.
Neil, you must have had a couple of cringeworthy dates.
Oh, it was probably...
I don't know why I say that, but...
Well, no, it was probably my wife, who I'm now happily married to, have been with her a long time now, but on our first or second date, when I was back in Dagenham, I didn't have a pot to pee in, and I had it all planned out. I'd take her bowling, queued up for an hour for bowling, and the bowling game, if you play bowling, just the two of you, I didn't think this through, it was all over in 5 minutes. 10 frames doesn't take more than 5 minutes. I had not a single penny left, not even for a can of Coke. So we spent the rest of the night on a park bench outside the bowling alley with me having no money, waiting for her parents to come and pick her up to take her home. So I looked a bit of a skinflint on the first date. I did not manage my time very efficiently, or my wallet.
And the woman married you?
She did, and we have a lovely, beautiful daughter now. She's she's next door in a very cheap cafe having tea, so I'm still a skinflint.
That's great. I love that story, and that goes to prove. I have a theory that it doesn't really matter what you do on dates. It's more the person you're with makes it right, not where you're on.
It doesn't matter.
In the end, if you click with someone, don't
Absolutely.
you? That's the key
Absolutely.
thing. I can remember going out on a date once and we had absolutely nothing to say to each other. It was just an awful, awful evening. Now we have a text here. Unfortunately, I don't give their name. How you see a woman depends on how you were raised. If you were raised by a strong, independent woman, you would see women differently. Humphrey, what do you think
if
about
I was
that?
raised by a strong, independent
Yeah.
woman, I'd see women differently.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Well, I actually was.
Yeah, so was I.
My parents divorced when I was 4, and I was raised as a single parent, rough council estate, latchkey kid, sociologist cliche and all the rest of it. And I had a working mother, very strong, domineering woman. Gave me tremendous feminist values, which I still hold dearly to this day. It's probably why I've been with the same woman for 15, 16 years now. But having said that, I still believe that men can be very superficial, and I think if you can be honest about it, not all men, and not in all circumstances or all occasions, but they can be shocking.
I feel
superficial.
we're lacking a female
I
voice in
completely
this
agree.
discussion, aren't we?
Just on that, the idea of being raised by a strong, independent woman. My father sadly died when I was very young, so I grew up with my mum and my 2 sisters. So, I have as much respect and admiration.
And what do
for them
they
as-
make of this book?
I think they think it's hilarious. Not that they haven't read it. I don't mean my writing is necessarily hilarious, but the idea of me doing it, I think they find very funny.
Well, you're listening to the LBC Book Club with me, Ian Dale. Humphrey Hunter's with me, the author of The Men Files, and Neil Humphreys is with me, the author of Premier Leach. We'll be talking to him in just a couple of minutes after the LBC travel. It's 9:15. And here's Alan Cowie.
Thank you, Ian. Still got some long delays on the A12 southbound where the main...
Now, we've been talking about cringeworthy dates on the LBC Book Club, which is something you probably weren't expecting to hear tonight, but that's because we've been talking to Humphrey Hunter, the author of The Men Files. If you've got any examples of cringeworthy dates you've been on and want to share them with us, if you want to be brave, 0845 6060 973 is the number to call. Now, the second author that we have in the studio with us tonight is Neil Humphreys, who's written a novel called Premier Leach, a story of greed, sleaze and corruption, all set around the Premier League. Now, I almost hesitate, Neil, to ask you what inspired you to write this novel, because I suppose the reality of the Premier League did. What's the main message that you've tried to convey through the book?
Well, there's several messages. I think when I was here last year promoting my previous novel, Match Fixer, which was about the betting syndicates in Asia fixing games, I was here when the John Terry scandal, another footballer caught with his pants down, another misogynistic dinosaur again caught with his pants down.
But what's different about footballers to any other walk of life?
No, that's the point I was going to make. It was the backlash that surprised me. I felt, being in the UK at the time, that he was the first time that we were seeing a genuine national, both in media and in public opinion, backlash towards our national game. I think it had been building for some time. I think once we started moving into the 100,000, 150,000 pounds a week, Britain moved into a recession. It was just like, it was one scandal, one sleazy, terrible incident too many, where finally I felt for the first time enough was enough. And that inspired me to write the book, because I've been feeling that for some time. I thought, how many dodgy, billionaires from overseas with dubious human rights backgrounds and raise their wealth through dubious means are going to take over another EPL club? How many players are going to take out another court injunction, gag another woman, pay off another prostitute or whatever? How far do we have to go before people start saying enough's enough? And I must make the point, footballers have never been saints. We all remember our Georgie Bests and our Frank McAvennies, sleeping with a dentist reception in a chair in Melbourne, and, Mark Ward, and there's dozens of other examples over the year. But what's different now is they didn't have the coterie of agents and lawyers around them, these parasites who literally leech off them. So they need them to stand the game, the Ashley Cole. So you can walk around a training ground and shoot an intern at a training session, and you're going to be invulnerable. You know you're going to be untouchable. You know you're not going to be censured in any way because you are bigger than your manager. You are bigger than your club in many ways. You are too damn powerful. You are like your Al Capones of your little kingdoms. They are literally untouchable, and they know it. And I think the public thought, this is too much. Enough's enough. So there was I thought, a huge backlash to the John Terry scandal and subsequent ones with Wayne Rooney. And if you take the Rooney example, equally fascinating. He did not anticipate the backlash he got from Manchester United supporters, and that was a victory for Alex Ferguson, a big victory for Alex Ferguson.
This was when he wanted to
he asked to have his salary. Yeah, he asked to. He called the club's bluff. Double my salary or I'm off, basically. He did not anticipate the negative public reaction. We are facing the worst recession in a generation. People are losing their jobs daily. You're getting 500 applications for shelf stacker jobs in supermarkets. Here's a man earning £125,000 a week, wants it doubled to £250,000 a week. Yes, you get paid the market rate, but that was too much. That became almost vulgar.
Might have helped if he'd had a good game occasionally.
Well, it did at the time. He was a shocker, wasn't he? But it went beyond just being greedy. It became vulgar. It became obscene. And before you know it, you got fans outside his house and suddenly, wait, I'll sign a contract and shut up. So there's definitely a mood now where the public thinks enough's enough because many, many footballers are earning too much money. Our mutual hero, Billy Bonds, one of my favourite footballers of all time, West Ham captain, he said it best, He's got no issue with the world's best players earning £150,000 a week. That's the market rate. He's got no issue with that. He said this in an interview. What he has an issue with is these journeyman footballers earning £40,000-50,000 a week. That's a problem.
Which some players in the Championship are earning.
Yeah, that's a problem. When you're earning that much money, when you put up that VIP rope and sort of separate yourself and make that, and there's that disconnect between fan and footballer, the fan can no longer empathise with the footballer anymore. He doesn't know who the footballer is. In the days of Charlie George and Bobby Moore. Bobby Moore was a World Cup winner. You could go down to Bethnal Green on a Saturday night, go into the Moro's pub. My dad used to do this, and he would buy you a drink. This happened to my dad. This is the captain of the World Cup winning side, 66, right? You can't get near Ashley Cole or any of these guys. I was speaking to Brian Glanville the other week, legend, a media legend. He can't even get near these footballers anymore. You can't. There's these coterie, as I say, leeches around them that separate the footballer from the fan. So there's no connection between footballer and the fan because the footballer does not need the fan. He does not need the media. He doesn't give a toss. He doesn't give a toss to the taxi drivers out there listening to this right now. As long as you buy your shirts, pay your Sky TV subscriptions and shut up, but I mean, they're happy.
The message that you're conveying there is that in the end, when we're going to have the equivalent of the financial crash in football, that football is, as someone once said, football is going to eat itself. What will be left then?
Well, this is what the problem, isn't it? When you've got more increasing numbers of foreign owners coming into the game, one or two, I stress only one or two, have noble intentions. The rest is either a money-making exercise for the Americans. They come in to see us making
What's wrong with that?
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But then you've got the other who just see it as a plaything. Whether they come from Hong Kong, Saudi Arabia, Russia, whatever. They see it as a plaything. What if they get bored? They've got no community ties. They've got no affiliation. They don't give, Roman Abramovich doesn't care about Chelsea's history and the pensioners. He doesn't give a monkeys. So he could just up sticks one day and go.
I mean, he would argue that he did. He has put a huge amount of money into the club. Some, obviously, a lot of it's gone on players. But I mean, Chelsea do a lot of community-related things.
They do, but they do. But I'm saying that what is to stop him as an owner? He has the right to up sticks and leave. He could do that any time. Then to Chelsea, but if you take a club like Portsmouth, again, foreign ownership. Look at Portsmouth; they almost went under. And it needed again, and other clubs similar, Plymouth Argyle right now, another one. It's the community in the end who are left with the mess. You see what's happening at Plymouth right now. It's the community that's trying to save their own club. It was the community in Portsmouth trying to save their own club.
Right. So tell us about a few of the characters in the book, because, I mean, they're quite vivid
characters.
You'll
love this. You'll love this. Okay, there's three central characters, and I took them on a journey from when they were wide-eyed, idealistic kids growing up on a council estate in Barking, Essex. Dreaming of following in, Moorhurst and Peters' footsteps and Trevor Brooking.
So it's autobiographical then?
Yeah, autobiographical. It was me, yes. And then fast forward 10 years later, and two of them have made it, and the other one didn't quite make it. He became their agent. And one of them sleeps with their best friend's wife. Completely fictional. I don't know where that came from. It fell from the sky. He doesn't care. He doesn't give a toss. He thinks he's above the law. As long as he's got the right people in place to pay them off, keep everyone silenced, he's happy. It helps that he has a cheeky, chappy, lovable, cockney manager, a media darling. Everybody loves him. Always quick with a quip. Always quick with a soundbite. I don't know who that is either.
No.
Always the best manager never to manage England. You know, he's a lovable manager. Little bit of a shady history. He's also from Dagenham, so he grew up in the era of Moorhurst and Peters. So he's the manager, and in the meantime, you've got a Saudi Arabian businessman who wants to take over the club just so he can have something to have little friendly bets with his friends at weekends, and also maybe sleep with more London blondes, because he's got a bit of a thing about blondes. So I took it to an insane, surreal, satirical sort of extreme, which is, you know, how petty would an owner actually be to buy a club? Well, this guy only wants to buy a club simply so he can sleep with more blondes in London. That's the only reason he wants to buy this football club. He has no interest in football whatsoever. But the way football is today, Attila the Hun could buy a club, and as long as he guarantees Champions League football the next season, no one cares. And that's the way the game's gone. So I put those into the pot. You know, I thought they were quite juicy, sexy ingredients. Shook them up into the cocktail, and I thought it tasted pretty good.
Well, I mean, judging by the sales so far, I imagine so do the readers. Humphrey, do you follow football?
I do.
And what do you make of what you've heard from Neil so far?
I think it's interesting. I'm a Cambridge United fan.
Good man.
And I have followed them ever since we moved to Cambridge when I was 6.
That was the first match I ever went to see. 1973, I think it was. Cambridge versus West Ham in a testimonial.
Happy days.
Whose testimonial?
Can't remember.
And a couple of years ago, I had some great times watching Cambridge United, particularly in the early 90s when we had consecutive promotions from then 4th Division to the 2nd Division, missed out on the first year of the Premier League in the playoffs, which, looking at where we are now in the conference, is quite something. We had 2 consecutive FA Cup quarter-finals, which was, it was just fantastic, amazing times. But then 2 or 3 years ago, Cambridge United very, very nearly disappeared because we had so little money. The club very nearly vanished completely. So I think, having sort of felt the impact, as I'm sure you two, as West Ham fans have as well, of the economic realities on football clubs, I still think, I don't think it's possible to say that footballers are paid too much, because they're all paid what they're worth. Clubs generally pay footballers.
No, I'm sorry, they're not.
However,
Benny McCarthy has just left West Ham, had been paid £6 million. He played 14 times, 11 of them substitute appearances, didn't score a single goal. That's not what he's worth.
But hang on a second. If you were employed by someone to do a certain job, and they took you on the basis of your CV and your interview and your references, and they said, right, we'll pay you this much salary for a year, and then beyond that we'll review your position depending on how you've done. If you do your job really badly, you'll still get paid up for the rest of your contract.
But in the end, that is why football is going to eat itself, because you cannot pay players this amount of money.
Oh, absolutely, I completely agree. I think clubs will start going bankrupt.
I feel the market rate, when you look at the market rate, that's the argument that the bankers of Wall Street used during the subprime mortgage fiasco, and they're using the same argument
now. We don't want to
now.
get into the subprime mortgage fiasco. You're listening to the LBC Book Club with Humphrey Hunter, Neil Humphreys and me, Ian Dale. This is LBC 97.3. It's 9:30. And Duncan Barks is back for another week, standing in for Clive Bull, and he's here with us now to tell us what's on his show tonight. Hi, Duncan.
Hi, Ian. Thank you very much. Some research has come out over the last 24 hours. It's been a report that's been produced by a think tank, and it reveals that the child growing up in a one-parent family is 75% more likely to fail at school, 70% more likely to become a drug addict, and 50% more likely to have an alcohol problem. So one of the things we'll be doing after 10 is asking the question, are 2 parents better than 1? The forecast for the Easter weekend is stunning. So we're going to be compiling, after 10, the ultimate do's and don'ts of the hot weather, like fat men like me not wearing T-shirts tucked into shorts and that kind of stuff. And also we'll be looking at school games. I wouldn't like to speculate when you were at school, Ian, but there are certain games that you might have played and I might have played and stuff which you cannot do now in the playground because of the increasingly litigious society.
British Bulldog.
Well, it doesn't happen anymore.
No.
So I'll be asking the question, are we to blame for traditional playground games disappearing? Because I have a theory, and the answer is yes.
I'm trying to think of others that we used to do.
Do you ever play marbles?
It wasn't at school, no.
Because marbles, some schools are not letting children play with marbles now because they might chuck them at each other.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Exactly.
Conkers.
I used to like playing touch it on bikes.
Sorry?
Touch it on bikes. Touch it on bikes.
Oh, touch it on bikes.
Yes, sorry,
Right,
I
yeah.
mispronounced that, didn't I?
Yes, yeah.
I'll leave you to imagine what that was all about.
Ah, I'm quite intrigued now.
Right, thank you very much, Duncan. Duncan will be here from 10 o'clock. Who's on after you tonight? Is it Nick Margeris?
It
or
is
it
Nick, yeah.
Yes, because Christo's off, isn't he?
Lost his voice.
He's lost his voice, and that's not very good for a radio presenter, is it? I'll try and keep mine for the next 25 minutes. You're listening to the LBC Book Club with me, Ian Dale. Humphrey Hunter's with me, the author of The Men Files, What Men Really Think About Life, Love, Dating, and a whole lot more. And Neil Humphreys is here too. He's written a novel, Premier Leach, a story of greed, sleaze and corruption, all about Premier League football. Now, when we were talking to Humphrey earlier, I asked him about cringeworthy dates and asked you to send in a couple on the text, and you've done that. This is from Dave in Cheshunt. He says, I had a date with a beautiful woman and realised very quickly that she was a total fruitcake. I didn't know I could run so fast. We've all been there, Dave. Chris says, I had a date with a lady. During dinner, she professed that she'd never been responsible for a breakup. I never called her again. I think you can do better than that, frankly. 84850 is the text. You can also give us a call on 0845 6060 973. Right, back to you, Humphrey. This book clearly is aimed at women, isn't it?
It is, yes.
I mean, the packaging is all very it's all pink and
and white.
female, and
Yes.
aren't you giving a bit of the game away though with this? And aren't you going to get a lot of flack from a lot of men who are saying, "How could you possibly let them know all these secrets?"
I think I am giving the game away, and I'm expecting a fair amount of flack from men. That's fine. But the flip side to that, I would say, is I've tried very, very hard through the book to make women see that we are nice and to give us the benefit of the doubt more than they do. So in that way, in the way of improving our standing in the eyes of women, I hope I've done men a service.
But I mean, you're generalising again, aren't you? Because not all men are nice. A lot of men do treat
absolutely,
women terribly.
absolutely. And one of the things that I say all the way through is that for every rule, there's something that proves it's wrong. For every exception, there's a rule. It's you can't say that all men are nice, or you can't say all women are nice. Some are, some aren't. And some men will meet some women who aren't nice, and some women will meet some men who aren't nice. That's the reality of the world.
Michelle has sent in a question for you. She works in an office of women. All her friends are married. Where's the best place for her to find a man?
Well, unless she has any particularly interesting hobbies or activities, I'd say go internet dating. Internet dating is the thing.
Really? Because
Yeah.
I mean, it is the big thing now, isn't it? And it's no longer got the stigma that it once had.
Absolutely not. I mean, I've never done it, but if I was single and in need of a date, then the whole world is out there. It's so easy.
It's so
straightforward.
unromantic, though, isn't it?
It is.
Because I mean, you're ticking boxes, saying, "Right, this is what I want," but just because you tick all the right boxes doesn't mean to say that you're actually going to find your ultimate partner that way.
No, but a lot of people do. And the way a lot of people meet isn't necessarily all that romantic. And does it really matter how two people meet if they're right for each other? If two people are right for each other, don't go internet dating and therefore never meet, how is that better than the two of them going internet dating and meeting in perhaps what you say is an unromantic way?
Neil Humphreys, you've been married since beyond when the internet was invented.
But since 1812.
Well, let's imagine that you weren't married for a moment. Would you consider internet dating?
Absolutely. I agree with Humphrey. You know, I think the stigma's completely gone. In fact, my wife and I joke that if we were to, one of us died or something, internet dating, if at all, would be the way to go, because you get a little bit less tolerant and a little bit less patient as you get older. The thought of spending nights in sweaty, sleazy nightclubs playing music I don't like, you know, all night long. And you talk about romantic. I mean, sometimes in a sweaty, smelly nightclub, that's not particularly romantic either. Or a pub, you know, you come out stinking of cigarette smoke, or if you've been outside, you know, and all these things. You go to a website. You filter through the lunatics, you know,
Or you think you do.
Well, you hope, yes. Of course, yeah, you see this picture of someone who looks like, you know, Brad Pitt, and then you meet him and he's a gravel pit, but, you know, you can't do much about that. But yeah, you filter through, you try to get shared interests. You basically do what often takes you 6 weeks and a very expensive credit card account to do on a number of dates. You can do that in 20 minutes on the internet. I think Facebook and Twitter has completely destroyed the stigma that was previously attached to it. I've got no issue with it.
Has a lot of the romance gone out of dating now? I mean, there are people, I mean, I've never met one, but I am told that there are people who will go into a bar or a nightclub. This is men. They will ask 10 women if they want to have sex with them that night. Just come out straight out with it, and 1 out of 10 will say yes.
Yes. Can I interject briefly? That a friend of mine did that. He was a PE teacher, so supposedly in a position of responsibility. He told me that he actually used to do that. He used to go out to pubs and clubs, have a few beers, needed tremendous self-confidence, and would go around the room and say, would you like to sleep with me tonight after we finished in the pub? He'd get slaps. He'd get sworn at. He said every single time, if you've got unbelievable self-confidence and keep going, one will say yes eventually.
And is that what it's about? Confidence?
I think confidence is irreplaceable, no matter what kind of situation you're in. A friend of mine, or several friends of mine are like this actually. They will go somewhere, try to speak to a girl. They might go up to her and say, "Oh, nice shoes. What's your name?" or something equally simple, really. And if she doesn't want to talk to them, he'll just go and find another one and keep going. But the fact is, the more you try...
See, I couldn't do that. The feeling of rejection.
I couldn't do it either.
It would be terrible.
But the more you try, and the same thing goes for women with internet dating as well. The more you try, and the more you try with confidence, the more chance you have of succeeding.
And do chat-up lines work anymore? Because, I mean, some of them that you hear are just so corny. And you think, how on earth does anyone get a girlfriend when they come out with that line?
I don't know, to be honest. I kind of think that if someone can come up with an original line to start with, and someone then responds with something that maybe takes the mickey out of them a little bit, and they then start a bit of banter that way, then great. And I think that, to show they both have a bit of sense of humour, I think that can work. But the idea of a man coming up to a girl and coming up with some magical line which immediately has her swooning at his feet, I just think that's nonsense.
But that is the most terrible thing, isn't it? I mean, I can remember lots of school discos thinking, oh God, what can I say? What do I do?
Me too.
I mean, there is no secret to it, is there?
And as soon as you start worrying about what to say, you suddenly have nothing at all to say.
Yeah.
Literally nothing. You think the worst possible thing that can happen is to actually be stuck in a situation where you're talking one-on-one with someone.
And what about dating etiquette? Sort of on a first date. Now, should the man always pay? Is that the sort of thing you go into in this book?
It is, and I think that if a man has asked a woman out, then he should pay. I wouldn't ever rule out going Dutch further down the line, and I honestly don't think I'm sexist in any way at all. I just think it's nice that if a man asks a woman out, he pays. I do think, however, that the women, for manners' sake, should offer to pay. She should put up a little bit of a fight, and then when he says, no, look, really, I'm paying, she should say that's fine. And I think that's a very polite way of making everyone
It is
happy.
also sexist, though.
Is it?
Yes.
Sorry.
But then again, I suspect that most of the women listening to the programme would say, well, yeah, actually, if you made me pay, there wouldn't be a second
men are
date.
men and women are women. Is that sexist? I don't know. Do women like having doors open for them? Is it sexist to open doors for women?
Well, I tell you, some of the feminists that I regularly interview on this programme, I'm sure wouldn't. No, they
Really?
would think it's sexist.
Well, I always open doors for women, and I don't think there's anything.
What are the telltale signs, Humphrey, if someone's just not interested? Is it just sort of they don't say anything? Or
The golden rule, I think, and I've heard this conversation so many times, women will sit there and talk about a guy that one of them's met, and he said this in a text message, and he put his comma there, and this is what he said, and maybe he said that, and it was this time of day, and I don't know if I should text him back, and he took an hour to reply to me, then he took 2 hours, and on and on and on they go. But the golden rule is, if he hasn't been in touch, and he's not trying to see you, he's not interested. It's really that simple.
well, it's both ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It does. If someone is not wanting to see you and not trying to see you, if someone's calling you once a week at midnight, then they're not interested, or they're interested in one thing.
And quite often you hear about people who've been quite good friends for some time, sometimes after years developing a relationship. How often does that work out, and what advice would you give?
I would say go into it very carefully if you do. I know 2 couples who were friends for a long time before these two couples got together, and it's worked brilliantly for both of them. When it doesn't work out is when 2 couples go into it. When 2 people go into it for different reasons. If one of them goes into it thinking, "Oh, this person might be the one I spend the rest of my life with," whereas the other one thinks, "Well, this is going to be a bit of fun for a while. I know him or her quite well already, and I know that this is going to be fun and nice, and I trust them, etc." Then that's the recipe for trouble. The recipe for trouble is when one person wants more than the other. And so I think the way to do it, if you're going to, is to have a very honest and open conversation with each other at the beginning, and only go into a potential relationship with a good friend, if you think it's something that could become something serious.
And how did you meet your partner, Charlotte?
At a wedding. a friend of mine married a friend of hers.
That happens quite a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it was interesting. It was great. It was more than interesting. It's very
And the most important question of all, in 30 seconds, please: how do you get men to do the dishes?
Praise and rewards.
I thought you were going to say with mild green fairy liquid. But, you're listening to the LBC Book Club with me, Ian Dale. Humphrey Hunter's been talking about his book, The Men Files, and we'll be coming back to Neil Humphreys, who's going to be talking about his novel, Premier Leach, in just a couple of minutes' time. It's 9:45. And here's Alan Cowie with the travel.
Thank you, Ian. Still got the problems on the A12 southbound.
And welcome back to the LBC Book Club. Neil Humphreys is with me, the author of Premier Leach. It's a gripping novel, a story of greed, sleaze and corruption. And Humphrey Hunter's here too, the author of The Men Files. Now, Neil, let's go back to your book. What do you think will happen when UEFA sort of really introduce their proper fair play rules? We've got this respect agenda as well. I mean, it's really scratching the surface, isn't it? They're not really going to do anything meaningful.
They're not going to do anything, are they? Are they going to seriously throw Chelsea out of the Champions League? Because the way it stands at the moment, after forking out 50 million for Fernando Torres, they're not even close to meeting that threshold. Nor Real Madrid, nor a number of other teams. They're not going to throw these teams out of the UEFA Champions League, and those teams know it. The same reason why Alex Ferguson doesn't do interviews week in, week out for the media. He doesn't need the media need him. He knows it, and they know it. Just as the clubs in the UEFA Champions League know that they are bigger than the Champions League, the league can't survive without them. Nothing will happen. And they'll continue to buy players with reckless abandon, as they have been for the last 10 or 12 years.
And the fans really have very little influence on any. I mean, I suppose maybe sort of Division 1, Division 2 clubs, you could still say the fans have a role. But when the amount of money that the fans pay through ticket prices is a very small percentage of the income stream, then it's quite obvious why many clubs will actually ignore the views of the fans, isn't it?
Absolutely. I have an interesting perspective on that, having lived and worked as a sports journalist in Singapore for 10 years, because I have seen the growing power of Asia with regards to the English Premier League. I've literally seen it evolve. When I first moved to Singapore, you'd have to pick up a distant sort of the world service on a radio wireless to pick up what was going on in the EPL. Now I see every single game live in Asia and Australia, which you don't actually get here for those those rulings on Saturday matches. Yeah. I see every game live there. So the fan here, the local community fan here, is an irrelevance. He's almost a pest when he complains and, puts his banners out and scarves and whatnot, protest scarves at Old Trafford. He's a pest because they will change kick-off times whenever they like to suit Asian TV markets. They will bring in new strips whenever they like for Asian markets. In the good old days, you remember when West Ham used to do their pre-seasons down at Orient and Romford and these places. Now, of course, clubs go to Kuala Lumpur, to Singapore, to Thailand, Bangkok. All of these tours I've covered over the years. The English fan of the English game, the fan, incidentally, the people listening to this radio station right now, who kept the game alive when, let's be honest, it was on its knees after post-Hillsborough in the early 90s. The game was dying. That fan kept the game alive. Now, that fan is...
What was the other thing that brought the game back to life in the early 90s?
What, the Taylor Report? The
Premier League and Sky Sports.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that. I'm not one of those nostalgics who pines for the days when everyone peed in each other's pockets and it was concrete terracing and, and there was football hooliganism and you couldn't watch West Ham and Millwall, and I'm not going to do all that nonsense. But something has changed forever. Of course, it's a wonderful family-friendly product. Well, it is on the surface, but it's a wonderful family-friendly product.
Who's to blame that it's changed? Is it actually the advent of Sky Sports? Is it Rupert Murdoch that's changed the game? I mean, I would say no. I think actually Sky Sports has done a fantastic job for football, but somewhere something has gone wrong that has allowed all of these clubs to spend millions and millions on players' wages, and in the end, they know that at some point it'll come back to haunt them.
It's an amalgam thing. Yes, the Sky Sports thing is an issue, but I also believe, again, having lived in Asia, that the growth of Asia is a major reason for what's happened. That's why you're seeing a number of Asian owners, and you will continue to see a number of Asian owners. I'll be surprised in the next sort of decade or so, 60, 70, 80% of the EPL is not owned by Southeast Asia and East Asia. I'll be very surprised. Betting syndicates, in a word. Because the advent of...
Well, we might as well all give up and go home then.
Well, online internet gambling changed everything. because up until the sort of late 80s, early 90s, gambling syndicates, I'm talking legal ones, I'm not even going into the illegal ones because that would be another program altogether, but the legal betting syndicates focused on their own respective leagues. But once you got satellite television, live feeds into your living room, and then online betting agencies, we're talking billions and billions of dollars, mind-boggling sums. You go to any cafe bistro in Singapore, Bangkok, Thailand, Vietnam, anywhere, you will see hundreds and hundreds of people watching EPL games where it's standing room only. And I tell you this now, and I know this, having lived there, it's not a football culture over there, and people may be shocked to hear this, it's a football betting culture, primarily. Too many eyeballs, too much revenue, too many cable subscriptions, all there, watching the games every week, for betting purposes. It's just too much money.
So what can the British football establishment learn from your book?
What can they learn from my book? I don't think, honestly, they'll learn anything. Honestly, I don't. I think the average fan will read this book, the disillusioned fan. I love the game. Don't get me wrong, I love the game. I didn't love it last week against Aston Villa, but generally I love the game. I just think that the disillusioned fan will read this book and think, well, at least someone else is saying it. I thought it was just me. You know, I was beginning to feel like I was irrelevant.
Okay, well, but in an ideal world, if you were the supremo of English football, what would you do? Would you introduce wage caps for players? Would you reintroduce terracing? What would be your recipe?
I wouldn't introduce wage caps, no, because I don't think it works. I've been living in Australia, and the Aussie rules football over there. They have a social contract.
Basketball, I'm told.
Yeah, well, and I was about to say, it does work in Aussie rules, but the difference is it rewards mediocrity, because teams that get the wooden spoon get the best pick the next year in the transfer window over there. I don't agree with that. That rewards mediocrity. You shouldn't penalise teams for being successful. So no, you shouldn't have a wage cap. But there needs to be some rules in place. I don't see them coming in, you know, in terms of teams should be in the black. The Bundesliga is becoming the league that's being held up. Most of the clubs in the Bundesliga are in the black. Shock horror, they stay within their budget. They get sellout crowds at many of their games, and they have a lower foreign player ratio within their leagues. I can't remember the exact figures.
Who wants to watch it, though?
It's very popular in Germany. They have massive teams.
I mean, I don't know anybody here that sort of rushes to their TVs to watch German football.
That's like saying who wants to watch Dagenham outside of Dagenham, or Cambridge outside of Cambridge, and so on and so on.
But isn't the fact that the Premier League is watched around the world something to be proud of? And it isn't part of this the simple fact that people around the world now have access to the Premier League in England.
Yeah, I never said it was a bad thing. Look, I watch games every week in Singapore and Australia.
The money naturally comes from that increased access. And, well, I certainly don't know what we can do about it other than put in proper...
No, as I said, I've got no issue with the players, the top players earning the salaries, because you say the clubs paying those salaries can make them back tenfold, whether it's Beckham shirts, LA Galaxy, Real Madrid, whatever. I've got no issue with that. But what you have to accept, therefore, is that these kids who have come out from estates like Dagenham. The point I wanted to make in Premier League is I know the world that they're from. I may not necessarily know the world that they're in now, but I certainly know the world that they're from. Therefore, I can understand why the likes of Joey Barton and Lee Bowyer and John Terry may behave the way they do when they get all this money. They're almost like lottery winners on a council estate who have just suddenly inherited all this money, no social responsibility whatsoever, and they behave the way they do. So the difference now, as I say, when they're earning this much money, they're almost untouchable. So that's the big issue. They have too much power. You go into your workplace tomorrow, or Ian goes into the LBC studios tomorrow and shoots an intern with an air rifle.
Believe me, I'm sometimes tempted.
Well, I'm sure. There would be proceedings. There would be disciplinary proceedings. We knew. I was in Australia when the Ashley Cole thing happened, and all the Australians said to me, "Oh, that's it. He'll never play for Chelsea again. He's going to face criminal charges." I said, not only will he not face criminal charges, he will be in the starting 11 the following Saturday. No problem. And he was. That's football today.
He didn't mean to do it, though.
Oh, that's all right, then.
Well, I mean, it's one thing for some... well, no, let's not even go there. What next for you, Neil? What's your next book?
I don't know. It's a very good point. We'll see how this one does first. Next week, I'm hoping, touchwood, to meet with a couple of movie producers in London.
Ooh, very exciting.
I hope so, just to discuss any possible potential for Premier League, and then hopefully we'll take it from there.
Well, a couple of quick texts here on Humphreys' book, The Men Files. Dan says, one of my colleagues is ugly and a bit boring, but he's thick-skinned and persistent, and it works well for him.
Good for him.
And Pete in Wimbledon has obviously had a very bad experience here, judging by this very short text. We should go half-half on a first date. Some girls just go out to eat for free.
I'm sure they do. I think he should be more careful about who he chooses to go on dates with.
Well, I think that is very true. Well, thank you very much, both of you, for coming into the studio and telling us about your books. Humphrey Hunter's The Men Files. It's published by Headline in hardback at $12.99. And Neil Humphreys, the book is called Premier Leach, A Story of Greed, Sleaze and Corruption. It's published by Marshall Cavendish, $7.99 in paperback. Both doing very well so far, and they're both published this week. Now, over the next few weeks on the Book Club, you'll be able to hear from Paddy Ashdown, from Douglas Hurd, Kay Burley. Kay Burley from Sky News has written a novel. I'm not sure she liked the review of it in the Mail on Sunday yesterday, but there we go. And Catherine Mayer, she'll be here too during the course of May. This is LBC 97.3.
Total Landlord Insurance.